Dr. Washington, thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. To the class of 2014 and your families and friends, heartiest congratulations on this special day and welcome to UCLA. Welcome to this great medical school in a great research university with a superb faculty distinguished by immense intellect, skill, and humanity. I consider myself deeply privileged to be counted among the ranks of such a faculty, and I am honored at the opportunity to share a few remarks today. My father was in the motion picture business, and my uncle was a surgeon. Through life's odd twists and turns, I have spent time at both. But when I look in the mirror, what I choose to see and what I hope to see is a physician, a doctor. My thoughts today go to some of the doctors whose influence I have felt in various ways over the years. I first set foot in the UCLA School of Medicine in 1972. While an undergrad, I secured a summer research fellowship in the laboratory of Dr. William P. Longmire, Jr., chair of surgery, a founding professor of the school, and arguably the leading surgeon of the 20th century. When it came time to present my work to the other summer fellows, right there in room 73105, where you students have spent the week and will spend much of the year, Dr. Longmire was there. He listened to my remarks, which were of limited brilliance, made comments, and taught us all about surgical research. In that year, Dr. Longmire was president-elect of the American College of Surgeons, and at the height of his power and influence, and yet this was the way he chose to spend an afternoon. Some of my work made it into a paper presented by Dr. Longmire to the American Surgical Association the following spring. He invited me to the meeting as his guest and to hang with the leaders of American surgery of the time. I shook hands with Michael DeBakey and Denton Cooley. I never would have washed the hand, but as a surgeon, you have. At USC, where I was a medical student, we had a freshman course called Introduction to Clinical Medicine, where once a week we put on our white coats and saw patients in the hospital. My ICM instructor was Dr. Alice Faye Singleton, a superb pediatrician who was then on faculty at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, where I was assigned. My first week, she called me doctor. It remained, of course, to earn that, as at the time I knew less than nothing, but it made me feel 10 feet tall. On my junior surgery rotation at the county hospital, my attending was Dr. Thomas Byrne, a gentle giant of a surgeon who has been a mentor and a friend to me for 35 years. Tom was and is always teaching. I looked at the work he and the county surgeons were doing and I thought, that's honest work. I want to do what they do. At County, the residents and students took overnight call as a team, and one night I admitted a Spanish-speaking woman with an acutely inflamed gallbladder. The team recommended surgery, and I was told to get the consent, partly because this was considered lowly scut work, and partly because no one more senior on the team spoke any Spanish. I described the procedure, the risks and complications, and she said, okay, but only if you do the operation. Yeah. I explained that being operated on by a third-year medical student was not the best idea, but that I would be there in the operating room. A white coat and the patient's native tongue went a long way. My UCLA career began as a surgical intern on June 24th, 1977. We had electives in those days, and I spent a month on the gastroenterology consultation service. Dr. Sherman Mellenkopf, who's already been mentioned, the legendary dean of our school from 1962 to 1986, is a gastroenterologist and would make rounds with the team on Tuesday afternoons to see patients selected by us. One day we picked out a challenge, a woman with decades of abdominal pain for which no cause could be found. The dean was unfazed. With all of us standing by, he sat down on the patient's bed. He took her hand into his own, and he said, "Tell me about your pain." And she did. In the end, Dr. Mellenkopf offered no new medication, no diagnostic test, no procedure, no operation. Only a kind hand and a caring ear. That's a lot of what doctors do. We mop the fevered brow. We provide a little comfort. I have never forgotten that day. After electives, it was into the trenches on blue surgery Dr. Longmire's service. 2 interns covered 40 to 50 pre- and post-op patients, and in-hospital call was every other night. The first night, August 24th, I was off, but finished the day's work about 2 a.m., too late to go home. I crawled into a call room bed, reflected upon the mismatch between the size of my patient list and any measure of my competence, and I shook like a leaf with fear. It was a week before I made it home, and none of us who were trained in such a system can really endorse it, nor would we trade the experience for anything different. The chief of surgery at the VA during my residency was Dr. Edward Pizarro. Ed was larger than life, an icon. We residents were convinced that George C. Scott modeled his Oscar-winning role as General Patton not on Patton himself, but on Ed. Ed attended during my second month on the Blue Service, and one morning he ran into me and my fellow intern, Larry Kaiser. Larry is former chair of surgery at Penn and now president of the University of Texas at Houston. And this is the only piece of advice I'm going to give you today. Look at the person sitting next to you because she or he may become very famous. Ed found Larry and me staggering around the wards, bleary-eyed, in a state of stupefied sleep deprival. And he ordered us to the call room for a nap. Unprecedented. My current office is next door to that former call room. The room is marked by no commemorative plaque, but I remember, and I have tried to lend my own interns a helping hand when needed from time to time. In contrast to Ed, the more senior residents on Blue in that summer of '77 were pretty mean. One time they paged me to the operating room, not to scrub, not to be taught, but only to write the patient's orders. I looked down at the chart, and when I looked up again, the residents were gone. I felt nothing so much as loneliness and a dollop of resentment with a dash of anger. On that day, I made with myself a solemn vow that I would never do such a thing to a more junior member of the team. That's a vow I've kept to the present day. Another lonely experience came as a fourth-year surgical resident at the VA. There were 2 surgical services, and one Friday afternoon, the consults began to roll in. Within about an hour, the team led by me had been asked to see 4 sick veterans with complicated abdominal problems. I was worried that any or all of the 4 patients needed an operation, so I looked for the attending surgeon of the day and found that the entire faculty was out of town. This could not happen today, but it happened then. I was willing, although reluctant, to do the operations myself because we did operate independently as residents in those days. But the harder task in surgery is identifying the patient who does not need an operation. Another lonely feeling. Jim Atkinson, formerly chief of pediatric surgery at UCLA and now the hospital director at our Santa Monica facility, was a 5th-year resident on the other VA service. Then and now, a terrific doctor. I told Jim about the cases, we went around and saw the patients together, and we made a plan for each of them. Jim agreed to help me in the OR. When the missing attending returned to town, Jim gave him a brutal tongue lashing for his absence. I doubt that Jim even remembers the help he gave to his fellow resident, but I have never forgotten it. During my career, I have tried to repay the debt by sparing others that lonely feeling when I have been able to do so. Indeed, medicine is a team sport when practiced in an optimal way. I have been blessed for the most part with superb teammates. Of course, now I'm a chief of service, a professor, and a vice chair. From that lofty perch, I am considered, by some, an expert on many things. Though the last time I asked a colleague for help in the care of a surgical patient and was relieved to receive it was Tuesday. Now to conclude. My undergraduate school is Stanford, and on my first night on campus in the fall of 1969, the incoming freshman attended an outdoor convocation where Dr. Sanford Dornbush, a famous professor of sociology, began by congratulating all of us on our graduation from Stanford. His point was that virtually everyone would graduate, and it was up to each of us to make of our college careers what we could and would. Speaking to the class of 2014, at the beginning of a medical career, I cannot improve on that thought. So instead, I will steal it and offer it today. It was clear to me then from Dr. Dornbush's charge, and has been clear to me subsequently, from the mostly positive and few negative things I have gleaned from the doctors I mentioned here, and from countless others during my career, that I must choose. I must choose how much I wanted to learn, and by that choice, what kind of doctor I wanted to be. Much is made today of the skills of information gathering, and fair enough. I know the class of 2014 is good at these because most are texting as I speak. But the best doctors I see around me are the ones who have gathered the most information and learned the most and know the most about medicine, here, and not just in their iPhones. Each of us at the start of any great endeavor must ask this fundamental question. How much does it mean to me? What am I willing to give? The more you give, the more you get. And the competition you see is cutthroat, because it is the only competition that matters. The competition with oneself. The match that always lies just ahead. Class of 2014, my money is on all of you. Congratulations again, and thank you for your time.
Dr. Hyde for sharing those experiences with us. I now call Dr. Alan Robinson, who I introduced to you earlier, Associate Vice Chancellor in Medical Sciences and the Executive Associate Dean, and Dr. Louis Wilkerson, who I also introduced to you earlier, to the podium, who will introduce each of our matriculating students and the institution from which they received their most recent degree. In addition, Dr. Ted Hall, Theodore Hall, Assistant Dean for Admissions and Longitudinal Radiology Clerkship Chair, and Dr. Margaret Stuper, the Jane and Mark Nathan Professor of Psychiatry and Director of Doctoring Curriculum, will cloak the students. Also, Dr. Ari Gabayan, class of 2001, will present each student with a USB flash drive from the Medical Alumni Association. And finally, Dr. Neil Parker will present each student with a copy of On Doctoring, a collection of stories, poems, and essays written by physicians and non-physicians. Dr. Robinson.